Hello everybody and thank you for joining me. This is Ciara from Ciara Taylor Designs, and today I have the 12 Weeks of Christmas Week 5 card to share with you. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to create a mini slimline card, and I like to make mine 6 inches and then score that in half. So it's a 6 by 3 inch card base. That's my preferred size. I know there's a couple of different sizes you can do for mini slimline cards. This is kind of my default just because I find it really easy to trim and score and measure and everything. So, but I mean, there are other sizes for mini slimline, so really it's whatever your preference is. And then I'm going to cut down a panel here. This is HammerMill Cardstock, and I cut it down to be 1/4 of an inch smaller than my 6 by 3 inch, so that I have a bit of about 1/4 of an inch border around the cardstock there. And I am also going to cut a mat here in a little bit, but I wasn't sure what color I wanted to go, so I'm going to kind of create my card first. So I brought in 2 colors of Oxide ink. I have Tumbled Glass and Milled Lavender. And I chose these 2 just because I thought that they'd be a really fun color combo. I know it's not, you guys know if you've been with me for a minute, that traditional Christmas colors are generally not where I kind of go when I pick colors. However, with that new Distress Oxide color, because you guys know it's like a beautiful red, which I know is shocking because red is not one of my favorite colors, but I do like deep, rich, vibrant colors. So I'll have to get it and play with it and see what I think. But I mean, Tim Holtz has got an eye for amazing colors, so it's pretty hard to dislike anything that he comes out with. But we'll have to see how that red goes. But for this card, I just really wanted to stick with lighter colors that were kind of almost a pastel, and then just use those to blend on my background. So I do have a stencil here, and this is from Simon Says Stamp. It is the Simon Says Stamp mini slimline masks and stencils, and it's a set. I think there's 3 or 4 of them in the set, and it just kind of is going to create a border around my mini slimline card, and that's, or on the panel there anyway, and that's just because I wanted to create a bit more interest. So I removed that stencil, and then I added on a Tim Holtz stencil. And this is the ornate layering stencil, and I'm going to bring in some iridescent glitz glitter gel, and I'm gonna coat the whole panel with it. So this was just, it's going to be stunning and super shimmery, but it's subtle. It just adds some really interesting texture over top of the blended colors. So I just thought this would be kind of neat, and I've had this stencil for a little while and I haven't had a chance to use it. So I really wanted to kind of break it out and do something a little bit different with it. So this is kind of what I came up with. And of course we will incorporate some snowflakes into this as well, because I cannot resist snowflakes. And I did kind of scrape off the excess, and I chose to put it on a piece of scrap cardstock. This was actually a tip left in one of my past videos, which was a great tip, just because it will pick up the color underneath the glitz glitter gel, just because Oxide inks of course are reactive with moisture, so you have to be a bit careful. So I wouldn't put it back in the container. You can't really tell on that scrap of cardstock what it's doing, but it is actually like tinted pink, so I wouldn't have put it back in the jar. And then I do have some press and seal over the jar just to keep my powder, like I use that on all of my pastes, just because it helps keep them fresh and it helps them from drying out. So here you can kind of see that really beautiful stencil. I think it turned out really pretty, and this is where I decided what I wanted to do for the mat for this card. So I brought in some Tim Holtz metallic Kraft-stock. This is the classic one, so it's silver. And I'm just going to kind of trim that down to be about 1/8 of an inch smaller than my base, so that I have a really thin border around each edge. And I just thought that would look really pretty. I'm going to also bring that same cardstock in right here to create my snowflakes. So I have the Tim Holtz 3D Impresslit, it's the Snowflake one, and I'm going to run that through my switch. And I had to kind of play with the plates a little bit to get the right one for my machine, because it's a little bit, I'm still struggling a little bit to get the right plates to go through, so I have no problems. And this, it cut most of it. There's one little area that it did not cut through properly, and you could line it up and run it through again if you wanted to. I generally don't. You're going to see me bring in my mini snips, and I'm just going to trim out the one little area that I struggled with through the machine. I find this the easiest way for me. You can bring in shims and change the thickness of your sandwich, of course. I try not to do that too much, only because I really don't want to break my machine. So I would honestly rather have slightly less pressure and have to kind of trim something a little bit than have too much pressure and have the possibility of breaking my machine. So that's kind of my thought process there. I mean, I'll get there. I'll get to the right pressure and won't have as many issues, but I think it's always a bit of a learning curve when you have a newer machine to just kind of figure out its intricacies. So we're getting there with this one. I actually just picked up the chrome base plate to try that with some intricate dies and see if that helps. And I got a little out of frame here, so you can just see that I'm trimming off the areas that kind of got stuck a little bit. And it's really just this one area here, and it's not going to be perfect, but I honestly kind of love that almost distressed-esque effect that I get with how this came out because it didn't cut perfectly. You'll see it better in the end photos when you kind of see it up close. But and sorry, here, this is my my newest addition. This is Oreo. He had to come and help and check it out and see what I was doing. And he's the reason there's all those scratches on my hands too, because he's only about 10 months old, maybe 11 months old now. And we found him on the side of the road, and I brought him home, and he's been with us now for month, just over a month and a half maybe. So yeah, so he's kind of, he's just trucking around my crafty space while I was making this card so that I could hang out with him after work. But yeah, so he had to come and visit you guys. So there you can see. So there you can see that I did layer the bottom, or the small snowflake on the top, and then the larger snowflake on the bottom. And there are a few areas where you can kind of see the craft cardstock through, because this is a craft-based cardstock. And I just kind of like that look. Like, it's just a bit different, and it adds a bit of texture. And I kind of love that against this more pastel, more pretty card base. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. So I just enjoyed how they kind of went together and just were different. I like that look. So I did adhere my layers down. I used my liquid glue for this just because I find that the easiest way to get specialty cardstocks to adhere, especially something like this, because there's so much texture there, that I did want the liquid glue to kind of create more of a connection. Because this one now is sitting on top of a whole layer of that glitz glitter gel, that paste. So there's a little concern there that it won't adhere as well. And you saw that I used a little 3D foam square as well between the two layers, just to add a little extra dimension. And then, because I could never not add extra glitter, that's just my habit of life, I had to bring in a Studio Katia Icy Sparkle crystal and just added that to the center of the snowflake. And that's the only thing I'm going to add, because there is a lot of shimmer and shine already in this card, but every snowflake deserves a little extra sparkle. So that is the one that this one got. And then I am going to adhere it down just to the card base there, and I am kind of aiming for this to be finished here. I didn't add a sentiment. You absolutely can. I chose not to. And I did really want to make an envelope to go with this. So I brought out my envelope punch board. It's the 123 punch board. And then I'm just showing you the measurements for a 3x6 card. And it has like where to cut, where to punch, everything like that. So you're going to punch at the 2 3/4 mark, I believe. And it was cut to 7 5/8. But it's all on that punch board. You just follow along with it. And then you score out the A line. And I like to pull, this is my favorite envelope punch board for smaller cards. I do have a Slimline one that does mini Slimlines, but it does a bigger size as its base. So it's not quite as snug of a fit. And I generally like my cards to not kind of rattle around in the envelope, but both would do a beautiful envelope. It's just completely up to you. And then this blue cardstock was out of my stash. It was a 12x12 piece of cardstock that I cut down. I have no idea where it came from. I inherited a bunch of paper from a friend a while back, so I have a bunch of 12x12 paper that I have no idea where it came from. And this is some cool stuff. So I really like it that it's like a multi-toned. So the inside's like a pale blue and the outside's like a richer blue. So I love this look. I think it's great for envelopes. And then we are going to decorate it so that it kind of matches the card. So I brought in that same ornate stencil, and I'm just going to blend it over top of the corner. It's the top corner and the bottom corner. And I'm going to use that milled lavender for this. I held it in place. You could, of course, adhere it or use some pixie spray or whatever you like to kind of get this to adhere. But I chose just to blend it on. I wasn't really concerned about it. You could also mask off the flaps if you wanted to. Again, I didn't. I just aimed to not get it on the flaps, and I did a pretty good job, I think. And it doesn't show up super drastically, but I think that it turned out really pretty. And we are, of course, going to add some snowflakes to the envelope as well, because, well, you can never have too many snowflakes. It's just not possible. I'm a big lover of snowflakes. I think that they're like just stunning, and I can't help but order all the things that are snowflake 3/4 of the time. So I end up with a fair collection of snowflakes, and I just really love how they look. So I'm going to try, I tried first to stamp them on. Oh, sorry, I'm going to round my corners of my envelope first. And then I am also going to trim it. Sadly, because of how this envelope goes, they do hang slightly over the edge of each, so it would catch. So I kind of just trim off the tip of the top flap and the bottom flap. And then I do bring in I believe this is an 1/8 of an inch Scor-tape just to add the adhesive. This is my preferred for building envelopes, just because the last thing I want is for it to come apart or have like liquid glue gush out and then you aren't even able to stick the card in the envelope. I would find that super frustrating. So this is kind of my preference when it comes to making envelopes. And I do generally always stick the bottom flap on the outside. I know that you can do it either way. You can stick the side flaps out or you can stick the bottom flap up. It's totally up to you. I have a tendency to keep the bottom flap on the outside. That's kind of my preference. I like that look better. But I mean, there's no wrong way to build the envelope, I suppose, because really it's just 4 things being stuck down. So completely up to you. But this is kind of my preference. And then here you'll see I have to trim this down a little bit just because it will catch. So if I don't trim it down, the envelope can't close. So that's just kind of my preference. And then here I'm going to kind of just make sure all my folds are good and then go from there. And I really wanted to add some snowflakes to the envelope, and I brought out my unicorn pigment ink by Hero Arts. And I thought that this would be a great ink to stamp it down and give me these beautiful white snowflakes. And sadly, it just didn't pop as much as I wanted it to. So I tried this and there wasn't much of a center, and I'm kind of pondering it and I'm like, well, I'll add some more. I'll do some corners. Maybe I'll like this. It'll grow on me. But it didn't. So we are going to pivot and do something slightly different. And that snowflake stamp is from the Tim Holtz 2022 Stamptember release that just happened, in Stamptember. So in September, but I just chose to use my anti-static powder tool, and we're going to white heat emboss them instead. Now, you do run the risk, because I did not check if my Oxide ink was dry. So I'm going to have a few issues trying to get the powder to go where I actually want it to. Completely on me. I should have checked it. I didn't. That's my fault. But you could have pre-tested the envelope to make sure that the Oxide inks were actually dry before adding the embossing powder or adding the ink so that there was an issue. I didn't. So we're going to clean this up here in a second. You're going to see what happens. And you can see I'm just struggling a little bit to make sure that my envelope actually stays in the Misti, just so I could get a really good impression when I do this stamp again. And it's not perfectly lined up. I think I got it pretty well lined up, but it's not perfect. So there are a few areas that are just a bit overlapping in the snowflake, but I think after I wipe away a lot of the excess powder, you can't even really tell. And I didn't leave that part in because my head pretty much got in the way, but all I did was take a dry paintbrush, a very small one, and just wiped away the excess powder where it shouldn't be. And I had to clean up some areas of the snowflakes. So honestly, I mean, that one corner there is a little bit blurred, but I still think it turned out quite pretty. So I would love to hear what you guys think of how this card came together. I think it's stunning. It's right up my alley, but it's always nice to hear feedback. So let me know what you think. So I'd love if you'd consider leaving me a comment and leave me a like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do new videos every Monday and Thursday, and every Monday up until Christmas will be the Christmas series. So please come back and check it out. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.